our next person is Lisa Tedesco. And Lisa has, I tell you, if we need help, if we need information, if we need anything, all we have to do is holler. And Lisa appears here. I got to tell you, either she really likes us a lot, or I don't know what the alternative is. Right? She's going to talk to us about the provincial mandate for aquatic invasive species. And I believe that you're doing Barb's presentation also today, are you not?
Yes.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Lisa Tedesco.
Okay, for the sake of not having to talk with a microphone, I'm going to try without it because they're really, really awkward. Can you hear me at the back? No. Yeah. Not very well.
Let's try Lisa.
Okay, that means I'm stuck with a microphone. I am giving this presentation on behalf of Matthias Herborg. He is the Ministry of Environment's Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator, which is an odd title because he is the only person in that program, so he's the manager, the coordinator, the secretary, you name it, he does it. He's not able to be here, a little bit too far of a travel, so I said I would give it on his behalf. I will do my best. It's regulation, so it's kind of boring and dry. I can't help that. So I'll just go through a little bit about our provincial invasive species, why they brought in these additions to the regulation, what's new about it, some of the implementation steps they've been going through, touch briefly on the federal legislation because there are some things that the province can't regulate that the feds can, and keep with the theme of not moving us mussel and stopping the spread. So there are 34 aquatic documented invasive species in the province. That doesn't include all of the non-native stocked fish. Those still need to be added. So this is the current most up-to-date provincial database that we have. Almost 100 plants, 24 fish, 5 amphibians, 3 invertebrates, 2 turtles, and 1 algae. Of course, there's also a lot more that's to the south across the border in the United States, as well as adjacent to us in our other provinces and territories. They can both move on their own through connected waterways, so fish can swim. If there isn't a dam, they can keep moving upriver till they get to us. And of course, they can also be moved by humans, whether it's intentional or accidental, and they can be moved by other native animals, which we'll get to later. Invasive species have been identified as the second greatest threat to biodiversity after habitat loss. And Mike's little pictures and diagrams about the impacts of zebra mussel was awesome because that gets at why invasive species are such a threat to our biodiversity. They don't just affect one thing, they affect an entire system. There's also potential for significant social and economic impacts from invasive species. I can't remember the number that Sheila Street, who's with Fortis, has given, but it's in the millions of dollars a year. If zebra and climber mussels attach themselves to our hydro infrastructure, millions of dollars a year. There's domestic water intake impacts, and then there's tourism impacts, whether it's non-native fish species that become undesirable or your mussels. So there's a lot of issues with invasive species. There's also agreements that we have, both nationally and internationally. The Columbia River Basin Treaty is an international agreement that the province is a part of with Washington and Idaho and Oregon that requires us to give a rapid response, a certain type of response, if we have invasive species infestations. And if we don't have appropriate regulations, it becomes really challenging to actually fulfill the components of that agreement. And recently there's been a number of close calls that have raised people's awareness about the impacts of invasive species. There was the snakehead that showed up at the coast, and then we had 2 summers ago Shuswap Lake with the false alarm of a boat with mussels. So that's raised people's awareness and attention to invasive species and the importance of regulating them. So the Controlled Alien Species Regulation was brought into effect first in 2009, and it's enabled by the Wildlife Act. There's the Wildlife Act, remember that. There's the Controlled Alien Species Regulation. And it controls possession, breeding, shipping, and releasing of aliens. So these are non-native species that pose a risk or a threat to the public or the environment. And when it was first brought into effect, it was really to get at human safety risk. lions, tigers, poisonous snakes, crocodiles, you know, all those crazy things that people thought might be fun to have as pets. So that was great, but over the years, our understanding of invasive species and of the risk of non-native species has changed. And in December 2012, the new regulation and the additions to the regulation were brought into effect. And we started to address some of these wet and slimy things, fish, mussels. The first schedule, so 3 new schedules were added. The first one addresses prohibition of live species, and I'll go through each of these schedules in a bit more detail. The second addresses prohibited live and dead species, and then the third just speaks to where in the province or what other provinces would be considered already infested if things are coming here. So these new species go from, oh, I thought I'd clicked and I haven't. Hey, tech boy. I'm clicking and nothing's happening. Okay, we have the power to move things. We're here.
We all know Graham, right?
I'm revoking your
We
permission
spent
about-
lots of time together in meetings. Yeah, that part. So the new focus with these new species, there's still that public health, public threats piece, but a lot of it brings in the ecosystem and the native species threats and risks. So that's a bit of a shift from our prior pieces. So this is the Schedule 3 species. So these are species that are prohibitive live. So the reason why some of them are prohibitive dead or permitted dead is because people use them in the food trade. So we couldn't prohibit all of them. Again, it's the prohibition against possessing, breeding, releasing, or transporting alive within BC. And it's a mix of both pet species as well as food trade species. And they're the ones that were considered to be highest risk currently in the province. They're all have the potential to survive in BC if they get released alive. You know, there's probably quite a few non-native species out there that somebody could release them, but the second November shows up, they're not gonna make it. Some of these are already present, so the alouette, or within the alouette drainage, which is on the coast, the weatherfish is present. So that is under the Cobitae family. Gobies are not present within the Kettle watershed, but they are close, so that's a group of species to stay aware of. There are bullheads and catfish in the Columbia system in the United States. So of course, oh, Matthias didn't know that.
Okay, so do you want me just to say what you've got here
Yeah.
now? Okay, tench, black bullheads and brown bullheads. That's all I see right now.
Okay.
And carp, yeah.
Okay, so we obviously need to pass some information on to Matthias, because he said the tent was in the Pond Ray, the Scofflaw, so he's in Okanagan.
They're really easily recognizable because they have red eyes.
Got it. Okay, so some of them are here, some of them are not, some of them are close. Anything that's in the Columbia system does have the potential to come up here on its own. We want to be worried about that. Next. This is a picture, pictures. Across the top row is the snakehead species. Down the outside left, the far left, are your carp. On the far side over here, on the right-hand side, you've got gobies, and then a mix of a few other things on the inside. But diverse species, diverse ecosystems and habitats that they can live in. We've got a lot of diverse ecosystems and habitats. We can support most of these species. Okay, next. So these are the ones that we're all really interested in. Schedule 4 is for the mussel species, the zebra quagga and the Conrad's false mussel. Conrad's false mussel is an estuarine species, so it will not establish here. It's coastal, so we don't have to worry about that one. They're difficult to distinguish whether a mussel is alive or dead initially, and so that's one of the reasons that both are prohibited. It's also important, and Matthias specifically wanted me to speak about this. The fact that they're really difficult to tell apart, live or dead, is one of the reasons why it's so important to make sure that even if there are dead mussels on a boat that have been out of the water for a long time, that they don't make it into our waters. Because if a dead mussel is found, there is no way to know if it was alive when it got into the water and has produced other mussels, or if it's been dead when it hit the water. And the same response will need to happen, and it will cost millions of dollars and a whole lot of people. So that's one of those reasons why that clean, drain, dry is so important. We do not want mussels, alive or dead, making it into our water system.
Just one moment, because as people are passing around the dead zebra and quaking mussels, I will mention that we are permitted usage through the University of Portland, and they are glued shut.
Do not open them.
Do not
Yes.
open them, but we are permitted, because now she's talking about.
Yes.
They're passing them around.
Yes, those are samples, which is awesome that we have. They're permitted through the university, the sealed shut thing.
Yes.
Otherwise, Dave will take you away in handcuffs.
Save for the rescue right now.
And the rest of the people.
And
Never
it's
mind
good
by
to see
that.
them, what they really look
They're
like,
just
because
so
the size,
invasive.
like when you see them in a picture, it's big, right?
Yeah.
That's what they're, the general.
It would be great to get some native samples too, because then it can
I
be
have some
to
of
help.
those.
Okay. Okay, so these are the prohibitions that are listed for these schedules under the regulation. Possession, as we talked about, breeding, releasing into BC waters, or allowing an individual to be released or escape. So even if you happen to, by accident, get one out of your aquarium into a river, which would be a real weird accident, it's still prohibited. Allowing mussels to come into contact with BC waters, and transport. Now, transport only addresses within BC because that's all that the provincial government has jurisdiction over, and that's why I'll talk a little bit about federal regulations later. In the past, so the definition for accredited zoo and aquarium has been updated because in the past it was actually pretty loosey-goosey, and people were able to tag zoo on the end of their business and have a tiger, and that didn't go over very well, so they've updated that, so that has been improved. That's everything. Okay, next. So this is what the province, and basically what Matthias has been working on for the last year. So like I said, the new schedules came into effect in December of 2012. So 2013 has been the first year that the new changes are in effect. For 2013, the priority has been on education and training around the zebra and the quagga mussels. They were considered a higher priority, a higher risk, a higher threat than those fish species. And they're also a lot harder to identify and to learn, so people need more time to learn. So starting with that first was considered the priority. So there has been training given to our conservation officers, to a number of the compliance and enforcement staff in forest lands and natural resource operations. And they've also given some training to border staff, even though there is no requirement for border staff to be monitoring and checking at this time. They were still given the training so that they're aware, so they have that information. There is materials being developed currently for all the Schedule 3 species, for the fish species, and that's going to be delivered next year, so in 2014, to groups like the pet industry and the live food trade industry, so that they can start understanding what is and isn't permitted and what it looks like and why. The focus is currently on education and outreach, but please, again, if you see something, report it to our provincial RAF line. It's really important. Okay, next. Speaking of our conservation officer, this is what the regulation permits them to do. So they are able to stop, inspect, and seize equipment and species that are illegal to possess. They're also able to issue decontamination orders for boats or other equipment and supplies. So if they get a report that a boat's just driven over from Ontario and it's got mussels all over its propeller, they can stop that boat and order it to be decontaminated. We didn't have that before, so that's a major improvement. It's an offense to not comply with an order, and it also includes wastewater. So ballast, bilge water, any of those things will also be considered prohibited, whether we know it has mussels or not if it's coming from an infected area. Pretty hefty penalties associated with this. Of course, in the initial years, generally the focus is on outreach, education, getting people up to speed, understanding what's out there, voluntary compliance. But if infractions are found, if infractions are serious, there are fines attached to it that are pretty hefty and they can be used. Next. Okay, so as I had mentioned, the province can only regulate transport within the province. Import and export is federal jurisdiction. So they're working on an aquatic invasive species regulation that will be under the Federal Fisheries Act. The province is part of a council, a national council that's developing the regulation right now. And Matthias says the province is being very forceful with the feds, making sure that this does come into play. So writing letters, having meetings, showing up to every council meeting that there is. Once there's a federal regulation, that's when we can start having requirements at border crossings for inspections and cleaning stations and that sort of thing. The timeline of spring 2014, to the best of my knowledge, is still what they're targeting.
Maybe Matthias is snowboarding this weekend.
He and I will have to talk about that. As far as in Mexico and he's snowboarding, I'm getting the short end of the stick. Okay, so the plug for don't move a muscle and preventing the spread. We've got these regulations, but still so much of this comes down to the people that can enforce those regulations to know what's happening. So please keep an eye out for boats that are coming in and out of the province and coming in and out of Christina Lake. We can't be at every boat launch everywhere seeing, who's coming visiting from Lake Winnipeg. If you see something, make sure you report it, whether you phone the RAP line, you phone Matthias, you talk to Brenda, you phone me. You can phone all four of us, you can't get any of us and leave a message, because it's really important that we catch these things before they make it into the water. If a boat has been out of the water for 30 days, my understanding is that it's okay, but we still want to see them washed before they go into the water because of that dead mussel falling off issue. And washing is different than decontamination. Decontamination is a really, there's a whole bunch of steps to it. It's your high pressure, super hot water, very extensive, detailed process. Washing is the basic washing to get kind of just materials off. And
just to add to that, Lisa, too, to say just that, if it's been out of the water for 30 days, it's fine. That's kind of a misnomer, because what we're seeing is if there's any standing water in the boat anywhere, those mussels will be alive.
The wakeboard.
you cut into my presentation.
Oh, sorry, I thought.
Keep in mind that with wakeboard boats, it's almost impossible for the ballast to be drained 100%. And that's true, but it's good because the ballast in those wakeboard boats, it's never going to dry out. It doesn't matter if it's been sitting; it'll freeze and then it'll thaw. There's still going to be liquid in there, and so yeah, that's why I actually don't really like the 30-day thing. It makes me nervous to tell people that because.
Well, that was just my point. Even if it's been out of the water for 30 days, that boat will probably still need to be inspected.
Yeah, ballast and bilge. So, report, keep your eye out. And here's just a few resources that Matthias had listed. The top is a video on inspection and decontamination, so if you're interested in seeing what that process is.
I have it right here.
And
Who wants to borrow it on DVD?
Brenda has it here. She wants to borrow it, if anyone wants to borrow it on DVD. Distribution map, and then the actual provincial regulation itself. And I did print off a few, it's just a little pamphlet on the new regulation, and it does talk about decontamination and the life cycle and distributions and whatnot, so there's a few over there as well. And next slide is, if there's any questions, I'll do my best. Not my area of expertise, and if I can't answer it, I'll write it down, I'll get your contact information and pass it on to Matthias. Matthias.
Okay.
Thank you, Lisa. A big round of applause for the tag team. Ian, Graham, Lisa, and Conservation Officer Dave. And Brenda, I might add. We do have a lot of fun here, right? Thanks a lot, Lisa. Appreciate it. We'll hear from you again later.